If they get the same answer 95% of the time, they're good to go. My way of seeing that is there's 5% of the patients they see that might be saying, uh-oh.
Welcome to the Cowles Ventures Podcast.
Cool. Okay, well, any questions before we get rolling?
I think I'm good.
Okay. Ready to rock?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking some time and coming down here and chatting with me. I'm excited to have you on. I know we don't hang out anymore. You know, we hung out in Sun Valley, but haven't hung out since. So
maybe we need to go back to Sun Valley.
I think we do.
But I think they need some snow before we go.
Probably we'll give them a couple months. Yeah. But yeah, so if you just want to introduce yourself and, you know, brief overview of what you're doing, what you're working on, all that, we'll start from there.
Okay. I'm Dan Roark. I'm the CEO of Gestalt Diagnostics. We're a Spokane-based pathology software company. We're digitizing pathology, which is a pretty exciting field. We're about 8 years into our journey, and we're following in the footsteps of radiology and cardiology, which digitized ahead of pathology.
Yeah. So I guess we can start there. Pathology. I guess could you define pathology versus radiology? And I'm blanking on the third one you said, but cardiology. So differences between those three, just so we have a base layer.
So radiology is, in the simplest form, an X-ray, or it could be an MRI or a PET scan, but any of those radiographs, if you will, that are done and then looked at by a radiologist, that's really under the purview of radiology. Okay. Cardiology is all about heart, primarily, and then looking at the intricacies of the heart and where there might be issues and how might those be solved. And then pathology, I like to say, is about 70% of diagnosis in the market around disease. They're the ones that actually, when something comes out of the body, first of all, if you have blood or urine, that goes to a clinical chemistry lab. Yeah. But if you have a biopsy or, a deeper blood specimen or a blood smear, all of that ends up in front of a pathologist.
Okay. And then why did radiology and cardiology, that's been digitized for how many years now?
20 years or so in radiology and, approaching 10 years in cardiology.
And is there like a specific reason why those two went first versus pathology is kind of lagging a little bit, or why is that break up?
People are just slower in pathology, they just, they're not in a hurry.
Okay.
The difference is images in pathology are orders of magnitude, like 4 to 10x bigger than in radiology. So if you think of like a simple X-ray, they used to put those on a light box on the wall. Yeah. When you went into the ER and you broke your arm, you were on your bike as a kid, and mom said, "All right, we're going to go get an X-ray, see what you did." Mm-hmm. And the doc looks up and he would point to the X-ray on the wall. He would turn on the backlight first of all, and then he would throw it up there and say, "Well, here we go. You got a green stick fracture. We're going to have to put a cast on that, Dan." Mm-hmm. But in the world of pathology, if you have a biopsy, let's say you have a tumor, hopefully not, but if you do, they need to get in after it's been sized and looked at by a radiologist. That's where the first thing that happens is you go, "Hey, this doesn't feel right," wherever it is, or maybe, you've got blood in your urine, a number of different factors, come into play. So then as they start to do that diagnostic work, a radiologist gets involved first of all, and they will then size that tumor. So they'll say, you can see this mass, if it's in the breast or prostate or somewhere else in the body, they actually blow it up for you, and they digitize that today. So they don't use film. They've not used that for 20 years. But in the world of pathology, the tool of the trade, as opposed to, say, an X-ray machine, is actually a microscope.
Okay.
So, in a microscope, it's a tool that's been around for 300 plus years, but it does not allow you to plug in, automated workflow. This AI world, that we're in today of, using computational AI, which is what we do in pathology. There's also, generative AI or Gen AI, which is more contextual, looking at, the reports. And certainly that's really important in all of the ologies, I like to say.
Yeah.
But the thing that we're focused on is helping with the disease diagnosis. So we're actually, looking at bad cells versus good cells. And that's what a pathologist does under a microscope. So what they can do under a microscope, I like to say, squinting their eyes, looking through two oculus, adjusting the different magnification of the microscope. Now they can see all the way into the cellular matrix of the specimen that they're looking at. Let's say it's a prostate. So, or even, if it's something from your esophagus. Now they can see those cells blown up all the way to cell division, which we call mitosis.
Yeah.
So, we can count those things with algorithms that we have built at Gestalt or with algorithms from partners. No one has all of the algorithms that help do this diagnostic work across all the different tissue and organ types in the body. And the same goes for radiology. But to give you an idea, radiology has about 700 FDA-approved algorithms, and in pathology, there's 5.
Jeez.
So, but, they've been at it for a lot longer.
Yeah.
They're, one image in pathology can be 10 gigabytes. So it's huge. So, we're adding, hundreds of terabytes a month of storage for our customers, which translates into petabytes of data a year. But this data, is helping unlock cancer and cancer diagnostics and then therapeutics, if you think about it that way, because, that's where pharma comes in. So there's all of these biomarkers that are associated with, a patient and the patient's response to disease. So if we can count those, like if you think of the biggest drug on the planet, that would be Keytruda from Merck. It's used for 40 different indications, 18 of which are cancer. The other 22, so you can't kind of pigeonhole or say that a pathologist only handles cancer. There's lots of types of disease. One I like to point out is like if you go camping with your buddies and you drink water out of a stream and you get, dysentery, highly likely that you got Giardia. But what if you don't notice it? It's a slow onset.
Yeah.
Or if you get Lyme's disease, from a tick. So you need to be able to see that actually in the tissue. And so if it's a bacteria, we can, they actually they crank up the microscope, if you will, to like 100x to be able to see, because bacteria are so small compared to a cell. So that, they have to look on one piece of glass, there's about 4 football fields of data.
Jeez.
So as they scan that, with their eyeball under a microscope, they're going back and forth to make sure they see all the tissue to find, I like to say, the hot spot of the disease. And then they go in and then they try and score that. And then based upon, they use 100 different stains or so in pathology to bring out the cellular material. Think of the nucleus, all of the other cellular matrix, and then the tissue, the connective tissue between the cells. So, disease affects, every organ and tissue type differently. And often, if you have a mass, I like to say mitotic counting is important because you can see how fast these cells are dividing. It shows you how aggressive a disease is. The first thing you're hoping to hear if you do have a tumor is, oh, it's benign, not a big deal. Yeah, we'll go ahead and shrink it, or we'll excise it, we'll remove it. Yeah. But if it's fast and aggressive and it's metastatic, so it could move, right? Now they're like, okay, now we need to take a very serious regimen with this, which could involve chemotherapy, radiation, et cetera. And then inevitably, then they'll go ahead and try and remove the remnants of it if that's required. Yeah. But all of those biomarkers that are associated, like for breast cancer, there's 5 key biomarkers. There's several others because there's, my brain, my simple brain says, oh, if you have, prostate cancer or breast cancer, those are the 2 leading ones for men and women. Well, there's only one type. Well, there's like 30 on breast cancer. So, you can't treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
So, how do you decide what's the best regimen for each specific patient? So this is the whole concept of personalized medicine. And so to me, that's what got me really excited when I was introduced to the idea of starting this company, was actually getting to help, doctors with diagnosis in a better way than what they've been doing. We all have family or friends, people that we know who have had cancer. Hopefully they've survived, but, my dad died of cancer. And I had an aunt when I was in college that I'd lived with. She died of cancer. Yeah. So, it's a big deal trying to improve this. And it's amazing the inroads we've made in, 50 years. Yeah. 50 plus years ago, there was, the postulation of what was DNA, right? The Watson and Crick era. Mm-hmm. And then there was the Human Genome Project, which I participated in with my first company, which was super fun in that you had all of these different countries weighing in around, hey, how many base pairs are there? How big is our DNA? Well, each cell contains 3 billion base pairs.
Jeez. That's
the equivalent of, like, when they actually printed them, about 30 New York City phone books.
Jeez.
And I was in Manhattan last week, and there are a lot of people in Manhattan. Yeah. So, and that's in every cell. And so when something goes haywire, it's, our doctors and our clinicians on the extended team who look at all of these different markers and try and say, hey, here's what's going on, and here's how we can deal with it for you specifically. And we're a big part of that, which is really exciting. And we have, pathologists 8 years ago were like, oh, you're here to take my job. You're going to, use this digital solution, and it's going to do all of the diagnostic work that I do, because really they're doing pattern recognition when they're in the actual diagnosis part, but there's so many other factors associated with it. My tongue-in-cheek response to them saying that to me was, well, do you have any friends in radiology? And they're like, oh, sure. And I'm like, well, what are they doing today? Yeah. They're like, they're radiologists. I said, well, how can that be?
Right.
They digitized 20 years ago. Maybe they're lifeguards now.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it sounds like obviously you guys have come a long way. There's been a ton of research into this. You kind of touched on it a little bit there, but you said that the original idea for Gestalt was kind of brought up to you. I mean, what was that process like? What was your background before this? I mean, this all seems very technical, very science-based.
It is. I think you got to take it one bite at a time. But, like if I look at my background, I have degrees in biochemistry and chemical engineering. I did a bioengineering project. And initially I thought I was going to go into medicine. So I thought, so this resonates with me, helping a doctor make a better diagnosis. And by the way, if I'm that doctor, if you're diagnosing with a microscope, you have to be in they call it CLIA certified lab. So this is a lab that has been certified to do these types of tests. And they can't take, it's not like, hey, it's 5:30. Geez, I got dinner with the family. I got to go. Oh, I'll just take my microscope home and finish my work tonight, because some of these cases, can't wait. Yeah. Right. Well, you can't haul a $150,000 microscope in your car.
Yeah, just put it in the trunk.
Throw it in the trunk. Everything will be fine. Yeah, no big deal. But so they have to do their work there if they're using a microscope. Well, the good news, just like radiology, with our solution, they can work from anywhere. Ours is, we say it's a zero footprint product. What does that mean? Another way of saying it is it's an enterprise level product. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well, it's cloud-based. I've never seen the cloud that we store all this stuff in, but it is all in the cloud. Where they access our solution without anything on their desktop or their laptop, and they can sign, if they can get to the internet, they can use our product. Yeah. Which means, like the iPhone, I like to say, like just earlier today, I got, hey, you've got an update. Do you want to do it now, or do you want to do it later? like later tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll do it tonight, but that's what we do for them, for these large organizations that we serve. We update, we do strenuous, QA testing. We have them validate. Once they give us the thumbs up, then we build a production environment for them. And then we take that live for all of their pathologists. So very similar to, the concept of getting apps on your iPhone.
Yeah.
Which, has changed the world.
Yeah.
Because, if we had to go out to thousands of pathologists and say, okay, where are you working today? You're going to have to be in the office and we're going to update everybody's laptop.
Yeah.
That's what used to happen. Or you would try and dial up to do that, which was really slow and painful. But today we just do one update and we're done.
Yeah.
So it makes it a much more supportable, better product.
Yeah. And when you're going and you're trying to convince people and doctors or hospitals or whoever, when you're going after these people, what does that, kind of customer acquisition look like? What is the process like working with hospitals? Or are you working with individual doctors, or kind of what's the scope of your guys' operation? Yeah.
So, the larger groups out there, like Northwell Health, they're a customer of ours. They're top 10 healthcare in the U.S. They ran a process. So they looked around and they said, okay, we think you're one of the best players out there in this space. We'd like to invite you to an RFI or an RFP, request for proposal. So, my team, first of all, we give them a product demonstration, get to understand kind of the inner working of their health system. Like this boils down to what's their electronic health record. The biggest one in North America is Epic. Yeah. So then the next biggest one would be Oracle. They paid $33 billion approaching 4 years ago to acquire Cerner. Then there's Clinisys. They're also a behemoth. They have U.S. headquarters, corporate headquarters in Tucson, and then they have European headquarters in London. These groups are really big. They're all over. Outside of that, once we get to understand kind of the infrastructure that they have that we have to tie our software into so that the doctors can see all of that patient information, then we start focusing on, okay, what are your subspecialties? What do you want to go digital with first? And, are you trying to use this data also for research? And by the way, now that you're wanting to digitize, you can train all of the med students or residents with a different routine so that you can't give them full access to the platform, but you can create a teaching platform so that you can give them case studies where they can learn how to diagnose, digitally. Mm-hmm. I can remember back in developmental biology, getting quizzed, we called him Dr. Mean. His name was Dr. Steen. He said it rhymes with mean. I never forgot that. Anyways, but he would say, go get this slide and then let's walk through it. That's what they would call collaboration today in the world of medicine, is, two doctors looking at the same thing and then discussing that case and why they think it is, at this stage of disease and how they would treat it. Well, you can't do that if, let's say you need an expert to weigh in. You have to, with a microscope-based slide diagnosis, you have to ship those slides to the Cleveland Clinic or the Mayo Clinic. It's fraught with weight. Yeah. And if you're told, first of all, hey, we've already sized that mass, now we've taken the biopsy of it, you're 4 to 6 weeks down the road, and you're just going, okay, how do I get this thing out of me? And, what's going on? Yeah. Well, and as the weight game goes, we eliminate that because our collaboration tool is immediate. It's all computer-based. It's like using a Zoom-like feature where they can share all of that patient tissue data and then have this other, expert, weigh in and then suggest based upon their biomarker profile what would be the right treatment regimen for that patient.
Yeah. Wow. And so now, and how many doctors now, any doctors that you've talked to or you listen to, whatever, that prefer the manual method still. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of people out there that are like the old school hardcore ways, but I would imagine the vast majority look at this and they're like, oh my God, how have we not had this the past 20 years?
Well, it's interesting. So yeah, I remember a couple of specific docs 8 years ago. One of them wouldn't come out of his office to meet with me when I was in there.
Oh my gosh.
When I was at their facility. He dialed into a conference call, and I'm in the conference room literally about 10 yards away from him.
Yeah.
And he thought it was a waste of his time because he was so fast doing it with a microscope. He's like, there's just no way this would be good for me. Now that doctor has his own practice, and guess what? He's digital.
Yeah.
And he called me about a year ago and said, hey, we should probably sit down again. I've maybe been enlightened a little bit. And but he's diagnosing and working with a group out of Iowa. He's actually locally here.
Oh, wow.
And, and he's like, hey, digital, I can't believe I wasn't doing it 8 years ago when you first brought it up.
Right.
So, but, that's by and large what we're hearing today. There's a lot, the challenges are more around the cost to deploy it. So to replace the microscope, they have to have a scanning microscope that then digitizes the tissue so that we can put it into our platform. And those are expensive. Yeah. To get a large facility like Northwell Health, they probably have 40 or 50 different scanners or, scanning microscopes. These can be $300,000 a piece for the high-end ones. And then, there's all these updates you have to do to them. There's the qualification of them. There's, the QA of those images and, how do you ensure that, you're getting, the best image quality. A pathologist, when they get the glass, they know the quality that they're getting. Yeah. Right? But there are still issues, on the glass. And so if you digitize that, those issues are present. The good news is now QA software is starting to show up around the digitization to say, this slide's blurry. I don't think the pathologist will be able to read it, or we can't run our AI on it. Yeah. So we should just go ahead and cut another one of these and redo it. Yeah. Or, they'll get tears in the tissue. The way they actually put the tissue on the glass, is another one of those manual steps. It's a real head scratcher. They actually slice it like with a Hobart machine, really thin. Okay. Think of making a really nice, good deli sandwich. And then they float that on on water. And then they put the piece of glass under it. And then they situate that little piece of tissue so they get it right in the middle.
And there's someone, manually doing this.
Yeah, they're just, with a pair of tweezers and by hand with rubber gloves on and all of that. And then once they get it in position, then they basically fix it, with a cover slip, and then it enters the process where they stain it.
Gotcha.
So, and I mentioned, there's upwards of 100 different stains. Yeah. So what's really cool is digitally, you can overlay these stains. So if you think of a tumor, just, think of a yardstick, of a ruler, let's say it's a 2-inch tumor. The first thing that we all ask if you get out, when you come out of surgery is, hey, did you get it all? The only way you know if you got it all, if you can see clear margins. Yeah. So when they actually take a biopsy, they also want to see clear margins. So now they can tell the surgeon or the oncologist, when you remove this, they'll actually tell them, down to, millimeters, how much they have to remove. And then they'll send out tissue and they'll engage the pathologist to say, Bob, what do you see? And Bob will say, well, you didn't get it all, Jim. You're going to have to go a little deeper. Yeah. And so they do that process until, Bob, the pathologist, is satisfied that he can close. Yeah. And then, when he says, yep, no, you've got it all, go ahead and close. And they may go back and forth 3 or 4 times in the process of doing that.
Wow. And so when you're talking with doctors and trying to convince them to use this software, are they looking at it more of a time saver, they're going to make more money off of it, they're going to maybe, in the better way to think about it. They're going to save more lives. I mean, how kind of are they thinking about this and making the decision, yay or nay, to go with it or without it?
I try and keep it real practical. I tell them they could be better golfers.
Like, listen.
I'm like, hey, if we make you more efficient, you might get to the golf course an hour earlier tonight. Yeah. I think, as a doctor, what they tell me is, hey, I'm trying to get to my kid's soccer game, but I don't want to, I don't want to misdiagnose this case that I have in front of me, so I don't want to rush it. I think I have the right answer, but, hey, I am human.
Yeah.
And by the way pathologists validate, if one pathologist who's already certified then has another pathologist, beside him who now validates, if they get the same answer 95% of the time, they're good to go. My way of seeing that is there's 5% of the patients they see that might be saying, uh-oh, how do I know I'm in that range?
Yeah.
But, they have QA work that they do. Let's say they see 100 patients a day in a practice. 10 of those patients will be looked at twice, and they take the hardest cases that could be the edge cases to make sure they don't miss them. So a second set of eyes looks at them.
Okay.
And I like to say, yeah, but they only got paid once.
Yeah.
That's a great example of using AI.
Right.
So use the AI for the QA review. If they get the same answer, you can check it off. If they get a different answer, bump it to a third one or back to the first guy and say, hey, did you consider these results? Now what do you think?
Yeah.
And so then you can kick it after that to another pathologist. So again, AI, is a way of pattern recognition. We're more computational, but generative AI, which is, around building better reports. What's the first thing I did? I had a mastectomy or a knee surgery of my meniscus to clean it up about a month ago. What's the first thing I did when I came out of there when they said, okay, here's the things you can do? You Google it. Right? Okay. So what they told me, is that real or can I push the envelope?
Yeah.
Right? And then, it will generate everything, that they just did when you write it down. I had a mastectomy and they look at it and they go, okay, yeah, they went and cleaned up your meniscus. I like to say they took the gravel out and they sent you on your way. But, so you can generate all of these reports using Gen AI, but computationally, counting, I like to say disease and scoring it to say, hey, is it stage 1, stage 2? There's a number of different ways that they grade cancer. We've been landing airplanes, for 40 years with AI. We just didn't call it AI.
Right.
That's the new buzzword. But, I like to say large language models that we strenuously test. We use supervised learning so that we actually give training data that we start from. So we have to engage a pathologist to say, hey, that actually is a mitotic figure there. This is a mitotic lookalike, as an example. So, we've done this for approaching 500,000 of these mitotic events.
Wow.
So, and you want to do the edge more than the actual. The actual is pretty obvious. So we've done more, hundreds of thousands more of lookalikes than of the actual in this case. So that we can, correctly diagnose. And it's now starting to get used across 8 different types of tissue, including brain.
Wow.
And again, it just speeds their diagnosis. These guys, I've heard them say, if I have to count another EO, which is an eosinophil, which is, that's what lines the esophagus as an example. And you find them throughout the body, but they're like, oh, it's just mind numbing for me. Or if they have to clear 30 plus lymph nodes, that's really slow, tedious work. If you can leverage a model to give a quick review of that and then highlight the most positive cases of that disease, or of the, of the weirdness of those cells that have been affected, which makes them abnormal, then the doctor can just click on those. He can look at we show him kind of grid of 4x4 grid initially. Hey, here's the first 16 that we think are, extremely positive. Do you agree? Do you want to go to the next 16? Do you want to go to the next 16?
Yeah.
We can count 5 million mitotic events on one piece of glass.
Wow.
A pathologist will count a couple hundred.
Right.
And they're going to say, hey, uncle, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly.
I got enough to make my diagnosis.
Yeah.
And we don't count them all. We only want to count them in the biggest hotspot.
Right.
But, we can turn, a hotspot is another way of saying, the center of the disease.
Yeah.
But we can put that in a bright color for them so their eye goes right to it, so they don't have to search for it.
Yeah. How do you guys approach in such a critical, industry as pathology is with people, making life or death decisions and choices and all of that? How do you guys kind of explain that this isn't going to replace your job or fix everything that you do, but it's more of a helper to help them understand that, hey, you can use this as a tool, but it's not necessarily going to do your job. So you can sit back and be like, yep, that's good. That one's not good. Carry on.
We go to a lot of conferences. We have booths at a lot of them. Some of my teammates, sit on panels and there's a lot of dialogue. So there's been a lot of education over the last 10 years or more in digital pathology. Radiology, they don't even say digital radiology. It's just kind of,
that's just what it is at this point, right?
Yeah. And that's where pathology is going to get.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing that happen in, real time right now. I was in front of a bunch of customers last week, and it's really fun to hear them saying, I'm 100% digital and love it. And, it's really, made my work better.
Yeah.
And I feel more confident in my diagnosis, and I can lean in and, I can get somebody else to look at this case really quickly if I need that help.
Yeah.
So, that's all you can ask for when you're trying to do your job right.
Definitely. What do you think is the most common misunderstanding when you're talking with people about how this is going to help them and make them more efficient? Is there one specific area or thing that they always pop up that maybe they're just not quite understanding how it can help them, or maybe they're not being confident enough in the AI system you guys have created?
Right. I think it's always helpful if you can engage like a physician who's used your platform to have that conversation, because they can say, hey, so we have a medical director on our staff now. And so she was a customer for almost 5 years at a large reference lab. And she can say, hey, let's just walk through this. You subspecialize in breast as an example. Let's just do a breast case. Let me show you how I do it today. And I think you'll see how different it is than how you do it with glass. Yeah. And how much, extra information that you get doing it digitally. Yeah. Which, she's very convincing. And when you have doctor to doctor, the message seems to get through pretty quick.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, how many hospitals or doctors have you guys had that have had, bigger successes or maybe huge outcomes where if it hadn't used your platform, it would have been completely different?
Yeah. I want to say if their doctors are spread out, like if they're in Pullman or Moscow or Colfax, which, there's doctors that are supporting those smaller rural communities, they want to still do the sign out, and, they're beholden to couriers. So, I've had one of them tell me, in the morning I come in, I'm on Amazon waiting for my delivery. There's only so much until he gets his patients back. Yeah. So he said, I like to say he sent biopsies out in Tupperware, and he's waiting to get his, specimen back on glass. Yeah. But we digitize that right at the lab, so there's no waiting. Yeah. So that's directly uploaded for him. So I think, I don't think it's a deja vu. I just think it's a better workflow for them. Yeah. In that, again, they can collaborate right away. They have the AI at their fingertips for, a bunch of the different types of disease, so they can make sure that they got the right result. There was a 10,000 patient study on prostate, and they found 81 men were misdiagnosed as healthy.
Jeez.
That's the uh-oh.
Yeah.
That's what you don't want to happen. So 81 out of 10,000, that's almost 1%, 0.08%. So, 81 guys are said, hey, your life is good, keep going. They came back in and it wasn't good, which now they could be, much sicker.
Right, or worse.
The thing you want to do is you want to catch disease early. The whole concept of personalized medicine is to keep people healthy, not let them get sick first, and then try and treat them. That's when it's more expensive, and obviously it's the hardest on the patient.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that we've done, one partnership that I'd like to talk about is we signed a partnership with Optum Healthcare.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
Had a news article and everything.
Well, these guys are huge.
Yeah.
So, they're a $95 billion behemoth within the largest healthcare company, United Healthcare, on the planet. They serve 90% of all U.S. hospitals. They have their own solutions for radiology and cardiology deployed to thousands of customers. And so we're integrating our solution to those, which is rounding out one of the other ologies so that these guys can share this information. And what's ultimately really helpful for patients that don't qualify for drugs or on the market is helping them to find some hope through maybe a clinical trial.
Yeah.
And so sharing this information, A, it's good for the patient, gives them hope, and B, it's a revenue stream for the healthcare system who is sharing this data to pharma. So this data, this data lakes, you've heard a number of different names around it, but, groups like Tempus are leading in this field. And to me, it's a really exciting space, and, we're playing a part in that, and that's super exciting. And this opportunity with Optum for us, they're across the globe. So we've given them the ability to paper deals for us with their solutions. So we're leveraging their sales teams and their channel, which makes us so much bigger than on our own.
Yeah.
They've found huge opportunities for us, one being the whole country of Ireland. It's a small $53 million project.
Yeah.
There's no way we would have gotten in front of that project.
Yeah.
And they're pushing us on our a number of different approvals in Europe so that, we can be qualified for a number of these different bids that they're finding. But they're also finding a lot of great opportunities like the University of Miami in Florida, Branson Health, several others. So we're in front of some great opportunities because of them. And I think, there's other partnerships like that out there for us. And, that just extends our team and our product into the market.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned you're going to go into Ireland potentially. How has that process worked in the United States, working with different regulation, different, limits on things? Do you see that loosening up in areas that are kind of revolving around AI? And then how does that kind of change as you go international, country to country?
Well, so the VALID Act was struck down last year, which was the FDA's purview push to now control devices, like including our software, saying that you could not sell that product without having it be FDA approved. Yeah. The challenge of FDA approval is it locks your product in at one point in time. Anytime you add new features to that, now that would mean you'd have to recertify or go back to the FDA, which is an expensive process.
Well, and for something like yours, and we talked about at the beginning, when you're constantly making improvements and updates and all that,
we've got
almost impossible.
Well, we have a development team of about 20, and so we're constantly innovating. Yeah. I like to say, hey, is Word or Excel, are those products done? Are they fully baked? Mm-hmm. You and I might think so, but there's all of these new nuances or new case studies of, hey, well, what if we added this to it? Mm-hmm. And so there's, products are always being innovated. So we are working through FDA approval. We'll get that hopefully in Q1 next year. That's what we're working towards, which shows that we've done a certain hardening of the system.
Yeah.
But it's more of a marketing sign-off than
Yeah.
it's not an industry requirement.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of your previous leadership at different companies versus Gestalt, I mean, what's been one similarity or commonality between all the different companies you've led versus this one, and how has this one been maybe a little bit different?
Well, before I was on the research side working with pharma.
Yeah.
I like to say screening drugs, and that's a completely different process because nothing that's close to a patient. I like to say, I've learned to be a good listener, or at least, well, my wife may not say that, but hopefully she does. To really try and get multiple perspectives on a topic as you try and design a product that is for the market, and engaging a bunch of people, not just on our team, but in the market to make sure partners, customers, and then move forward from there.
Yeah.
Those are things that I learned early. I guess, on the company front, I would say, hard new challenges require, statements of work. You really have to document what you're trying to build, and that requires, strong product management, things that, as business evolves, you get better at. With my first company, there was this concept of lights out automation. What does that mean?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, well, really, that meant to them, hey, this thing is going to run on its own.
Yeah.
This is a robot, because I built robots like 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And, they did great, provided, all of the variables were where they're supposed to be.
Right.
So, like, what do I mean by that? So I remember I had one customer, and we had a conveyorized system with all of these different modules that were doing liquid handling steps to process, like, say, for the Human Genome Project, to do DNA sample prep. And so think of it as a cookbook sort of a thing. Well, the labware that we were using, you put them down your conveyor, and they could be out by, 1/8 of an inch. Well, we're trying to hit the center of those wells doing reactions and dispensing steps that you could only see on, under a microscope in some cases. So positional accuracy was critical.
Right.
Well, so if their labware varied by 1/8 of an inch, there's no way we could hit that.
Yeah.
And so they had tolerances on what they were delivering for the plastics, I like to say the test tubes, if you will, but they were all over the place is what we learned. We ended up numbering them, and we found, this labware, item number 49, every time it went through, it clogged the system. Again, lights out doesn't work when things aren't in tolerance.
Yeah.
So in tolerances, specifications are all things you have to build. So anyway, so those were things that were good learning steps or bumps along the way, if you will. But, I think, how do I building relationships, I think, is huge in any, as you build business, because, what is a company? Sure, it becomes the patents and the portfolio of product that they have, but that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It takes people.
Yeah.
And that's the interface to your customers. So to me, I love face-to-face relationships. We got into during the pandemic with Zoom and, all of these, not face-to-face relationships.
Yeah.
And you don't get a sense of the bad news when you're on Zoom. People like to be friendly. They don't want to tell you, hey, fix this.
Yeah.
Or else. So to me, it's really important to communicate kind of where you are, like set milestones, deliverables that everybody agrees to. And then, hey, those may not be, realistic, like the whole lights out concept.
Yeah.
Our customers were preaching that to us, and we're like, nobody's doing that. Let's see what happens. If you're going to leave a machine in a room by itself, we put strobe lights. So if it went red, hey, that means come give it attention.
Yeah.
But there are different things you can do, and you can have that at different steps in the process.
Yeah.
So I found that to be a really big deal. But I think also, the best new customer could be an existing customer with a new product or a new feature, or an existing customer that goes to another, healthcare group in this case. As people move around, if they've had a good relationship working with you, hopefully they'll want to come back to you.
Right.
So to me, life is short, and, creating positive, strong relationships is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. And when you're the leader of the company and you're looking at your workforce and you're trying to figure out how puzzle pieces fit and what people to bring on, what people to, how kind of everything meshes, what are you looking for in new hires, middle level? How are you kind of constructing the team?
Yep. Well, there have to be some worker bees, as it were, in the mix. So, but you want to kind of create some expectations of what that work looks like. So you need to create job descriptions and, again, set milestones on what you want people as you bring them in, the tasks that you want them to be responsible for. And you can, kind of quarter by quarter say, hey, here's some of the things we want to see you do in this job. By the way, this is a completely new role for us as a company. So there'll be some learning for both of us, but we want you to raise your hand. But we do expect you to be pretty independent. I like to give people responsibility and let them go after it and, come and say, hey, I need some help on some of this. But if they need help on all of it, then they might not be a good fit.
Yeah. That's fair.
So
that's fair. And then why in Spokane? Why are you, this seems like, obviously Spokane and Washington State as a whole is a big healthcare hub and there's a lot of innovation going, but why specifically are you building this in Spokane?
Well, I grew up here, left for 20 years and got a chance. Well, I just said, hey, at this point in my career, I'm ready. I'm going to move back and see if I can raise my kids and have a business in Spokane. So I built a company, moved here in 2002. And, what I knew when I came home was, there was this burgeoning, healthcare, I'll say, across Providence and Sacred Heart, and, all the way to Coeur d'Alene and, the outlying areas here. And I could see that the universities were growing a lot. Now Gonzaga has a med school, Washington State has a med school, Gonzaga's in partnership with the University of Washington. Getting these students coming out of these medical schools here locally is really awesome. Yeah. And that a lot of them, they train a tremendous amount of med students in this region, actually more than in the Seattle area, I've been told. Yeah. So there's just a variety of opportunities for that here. I think the kind of businesses I've built, having, PhD, master's level programs, in I'll say the physical sciences, helping, innovate and build new products. Look at Schweitzer Engineering. Ed Schweitzer was a professor at Washington State. And so, he's a great success story in what he's built in the region and across the globe. So many businesses, Hewlett-Packard started out of a garage. So, Bill Gates and company started, 2 guys.
Anything else you want to add? Where can people find you? If people are interested, want to reach out to you, learn more about Gestalt, find out more about software in the company.
Yeah. Look me up online on LinkedIn or go to gestaltdiagnostics.com. I have my contact there as well. But yeah, love to chat with people. I love to see people that are excited to pursue a career in engineering or software development. It takes all facets to bring companies to the market.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.